Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany, and this is the Berg, a tech and leadership podcast series by the Berg School of Computer Science and Information Systems. Today, our guest is Vineet Joseph, the co-founder and CEO of Touch, which is a new startup dedicated to helping users achieve financial independence. Prior to starting Touch, Vineet has also worked at companies such as Google, shied Technologies, and Oracle, primarily in management positions. With all the knowledge and experience he has obtained, Vineet has been kind enough to sit with us today and share what he has learned. So with that being said, Vineet, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brittany. This is a great opportunity and really excited to be associated with PACE.
So I think I kind of just want to kind of help everyone understand who you are. So if you wouldn't mind, giving a bit of background info, anything about yourself that you feel like would be enlightening.
Absolutely. So I was actually born to an Army father and a teacher for a mother. And I think two things that I believe that I was really born with was a strong sense of curiosity and a tremendous amount of creativity. And I think those are two strengths that I've sort of followed on with me throughout my life. And being born to an Army father, we moved around a lot and explored different cities all across India, moved every 3 years from one city to the next, which had its own challenges because you didn't really grow roots, didn't really make friends for a lifetime, but at the same time was extremely formative in being adaptive, going from one place to the next. And I think also gave me the explorer sort of streak that I have today. And outside of that, when as I was sort of growing up and that I was introduced to computers, I don't know if you're familiar with BASIC, which is an old school object-oriented language type of language, which was beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code. And I got to create for the first time in my life a piece of code that was a calculator. It added 1 + 1 = 2. It was basically an addition calculator. But funnily enough, nobody cared. It's like, all right, you created a calculator.
Yeah.
But by the time I got to my 12th grade, I was starting to get disinterested in that, but focused a lot and wanted to learn about economics. So in my 11th, for my graduation, I was focused on economics. But by the end of my graduation, I think it was going from one step to the next, I went back to computational science and wanted to work closely in the intersection of people, business, and technology. And that was largely because of my fascination for people. I realized that I didn't wasn't very academically focused in life, but people were extremely interesting and fascinating. And so I got into sales early on in life, selling credit cards on the street of India. And then when Oracle hired me, I got, that whole world of technology sales and solving problems at a business level, leveraging technology really came to the foray. And I had a few mentors early on from some of the top schools in India that really helped me sort of inculcate and get to a point where I understood how to leverage technology to solve business problems. And then obviously I spent almost a decade in the technology sales space, managing $10 million+ of annual quotas for specific, strategic companies like the Travelers and the Hartfords of the world. And this was post having moved to the US in 2019. So once I moved to the US in 2009, we had been hit by the subprime mortgage crisis. So there was no jobs to be had. And so I basically went back to my roots and started selling telephone lines and internet connections to businesses. That was necessarily porting over very well into the US. But fortunately, CA took a chance on me, and I grew up in the ranks to eventually managing some very strategic accounts at CA. And then, a decade after that, got an opportunity to work with Google for a year and a half. That was probably one of the most formative experiences from a career standpoint, to see how a company that creates these wonderful billion user plus products, how do they really function? How do they think about innovation? How do they think about their people and managing their people? So in 2005, I had tried to create a startup, which failed miserably after 6 months. And so, but I kind of knew that I wanted to pick back up when I got the opportunity. And it was, late last year, 2019, that I, really started 2020, when I really started to pick up a lot of momentum. And the idea was we, started reaching out to people and asking them when would they like to achieve financial freedom by and not be reliant on their day job. And a majority of people, 60% plus, said that they wanted to do it in less than 10 years. That was a big key indicator for us. And 6 months fast forward, we had the opportunity of bringing on really brilliant talent from Columbia University and the Indian Institute of Technology. And we noticed that there were people gravitating towards this specific problem. In 2020, it started with a blog. And the blog, the concept behind that was focusing on achieving financial freedom and as much control over your time as an individual at an earlier stage in life rather than waiting till retirement. And as a follow-up to that blog, we also reached out to over 50 people that sort of responded to the survey saying that they wanted to, more than 60% people responded saying that they wanted to achieve financial freedom within less than 10 years. And that's a phenomenon that is fairly secular, we believe. We are seeing it now, even in the current economy with, a large amount of people putting in their resignations, so on and so forth. There's more and more people wanting to take accountability over their time and control over their time. And I think that's a trend that we believe is going to continue to happen over the next few years. And so we're trying to solve that problem of helping people achieve financial freedom earlier. And so, yeah, that's where sort of like my journey currently stands.
I, for one, think it's really impressive that so much has come from this blog. How did that even, the blog, how did that even start? Because I think it's in your explanation of it, it started with the blog and then you're like, okay, what can we do with what's already established and build on top of that? So how did the blog itself come about? Because I feel like the blog inspired this essentially.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it began with thinking about my own self. What is the problem that I want to solve for myself? And the blog was just the articulation of how I believe I would like to achieve financial freedom. It's interesting to solve problems for my own personal self, but I think it is way more interesting to solve problems that I'm facing that other people are as well, so that then we can try to achieve some type of a scale. And so that's where the blog really came from, was all right, this is a problem that I want to solve for myself. What is the solution? What does the problem look like? What does the solution look like? And then sharing it with, my immediate circle of network and trying to really solicit feedback on whether there is any merit to this specific problem of achieving financial freedom early in life. And so I think in a nutshell, that's where the whole concept of the blog really came from, was to, really validate whether this was a market need or just a personal need.
Mm-hmm. I think that, the fact that it comes from such a genuine place that shows, because I know people have ideas for certain things and they just don't relate to it. So it's whenever they make whatever they make, it just feels disingenuous. So I think that with what you guys started, it does really, feel genuine. And you had mentioned earlier that you had a previous startup. You don't have to go into too much detail about that. Well, I just wanted to ask, what did you learn from that? And how did that, transfer over into touch and how you could do better with touch?
Yeah, that's another really great question. I would say the biggest learning that I experienced from that startup was it is really, really hard to be of value and of service to other people at scale. It's very hard to find real value and to create new value that does not exist. because there's a huge community of people that is trying to solve problems. But what is the unique thing that you as an individual can bring to the table, and really help scale that value? So when we started off with that business, it was basically a recruitment process outsourcing company. And I had personally zero experience being in RPOs. But fortunately, I'd had I'd had success in sales. So I'd managed to wrangle a few clients that were interested in filling some requisitions. But we did not really succeed in fulfilling any of those requisitions, because obviously there's people who are much better than who we were in trying to fill those requisitions, because they were recruiters, right? And we had absolutely no background in that. So the focus area has been to help individuals really optimize things like their 401ks and their IRAs that are predominantly managed by businesses like Google, Oracle, so on and so forth. And now we've got paid pilots that are going on with users at both Oracle as well as Google, and also at Optum. So again, learn from that first exercise and failure, and try to replicate some of those learnings into Touch.
Mm-hmm. I think I think it's really great that you were able to learn those lessons from the first startup that you worked on. And in regard to lessons and things of that sort, like you said, you already had experience with other jobs. What have you learned from those jobs, that you think kind of added value to Touch now?
Yeah, that's another good question. Yeah, so the failure obviously with the previous business was the biggest learning that I got from that was it is extremely hard to create new value that does not exist, and in order to get to that value, you kind of have to spend a lot of time on a specific focused problem. And the longer time that you spend on that problem, the more you increase your chances of success with being able to solve that problem with the right team of people. And I think what we did not have with that was the right problem for the right people. And with this problem that we are trying to solve of achieving financial freedom, the main first step that we took was, all right, what is the problem? We are going to commit ourselves to spending the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 50, 20, 100 years on it. And with that focus, arranging the right set of people towards solving that specific problem. And the other big lesson that I've personally learned from the last decade is how to really think about large problems rather than just small problems, thinking about 100x size problems that the world is facing and breaking them down into smaller problems that then can be disseminated into creating solutions with the right people. And I believe with having a strong team like we do with ex-Googlers, ex-Mastercarders, as well as teams that are from super top-notch universities like Indian Institute of Technology as well as Columbia University, will help us get to solving those problems into the future. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. So I also wanted to ask you, you started Touch while you were already working, right? So at what point did you realize, okay, this can be something, I can pursue this and I can put, my all into this? What was that point for you?
Yeah, I believe this is usually not an inconsistent experience. Most people who have been in some sort of a paid job for a fairly long time, you get comfortable in the job that you have and the incomes that you already have as well. And so it was a fairly violent process because I was really enjoying my time at Google and I was learning a lot and building a lot of really great connections. It was a great place to be at. But at the same time, this urgency to want to solve this problem kept building. But I think the key moment was when we had interns from Columbia University, Wharton University that were interviewing with us and wanting to work with us on this problem and showing the passion for this specific space. And not just the space, but the belief that this team of people that we had created could go solve this really humongous problem. So it was that when we started seeing there was this interest, and then not just the interest, then following that we had people who actually joined us to work on this problem. Once we had people joining us, it was pretty much at that point game over, because I knew that the team that we were building would need the right level of support, and I could not do both Google and touch justice. So at that point, decided to sort of put in my papers.
Okay. I'm honestly really curious to know, because I know like you're kind of touching the surface of how everything came about. And to me, it's like I'm trying to put the pieces together, because it's like I might have like an idea for something, and to go from that idea to making it into something feasible, like again, I know you're kind of like you're kind of like on the mark with it already. But if you can just kind of go into detail, you said you have these people coming in, helping you. If you could just kind of explain a little bit more, only because I know they're like, especially a lot of Seidenberg students who they have these ideas, and it's like they're just so lost in terms of like how do we go about this? Like I know you said you already had a bit of like, technical experience. I'm assuming you had to kind of have people come on board to, do like the website. And then also I believe we kind of discussed well, not here, but you mentioned these two new products coming up in terms of like touch. Like if you could just kind of elaborate on that for me.
Yeah, I think if I understand it correctly, the question you're asking is, how do you really convert a great idea into ground value? Am I?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's actually the $1 billion question, right? Is like, how do you
Yeah, how do
really
you do
generate,
it?
how do you generate value? And and I don't know if there is necessarily one singular answer for this question, but the method that we've obviously followed is to focus a lot, rather than just the idea, is to focus a lot on the actual problem that subsists within a user base. And I would love to use, this example that Elon Musk obviously uses quite a lot, is he sort of goes back to first principles, right? First principles meaning having or leveraging the foundational knowledge of the sciences, which includes math, physics, of the computational sciences, as well as epistemology, which is sort of like outline of knowledge itself, leveraging what are sort of the fundamental foundational knowledges that exist, and leveraging that to now create value. When being close to the truth is probably the hardest thing to do. And the way you're going to be the closest to the truth is if you leverage explanations that exist, whether it's in math, science, physics, computational sciences or not. But then the other aspect of this is obviously people, right? If you have an idea, I would say that journey ideally looks like, if you have an idea, first things first, you want to see if that idea actually works for yourself. And if it works for you, then now try to think about who are the next 4 people that you could extend that idea to, rather than trying to solve world hunger and solve for the billions of people that are on this planet. If you can find those next 4 or 5 people that would get drawn towards the specific idea, you have to go find those people. And that is typically by sharing that idea, right? I think a big mistake a lot of people make with ideas is that they try to hold on to it as if that idea has IP. in order for you to be able to really take the idea to that next level, you have to vet it, you have to improve upon it. And that happens when you like share it with other people and get feedback and improve on it. And then not just get feedback, but hopefully actually convert that idea into something meaningful. But what we've also observed as part of our journey is that it's usually there's three prongs to getting to value. Number one is you have to have a problem that you're trying to solve. Number two, you have to have the people that are willing to go work with you on solving this problem. And number three, you have to have the money to be able to fund all of this, right? So all three of these things sort of have to like work in tandem together. You kind of have to keep building on your hypothesis for how you're going to solve the problem. You have to keep building the team that is going to help you solve this problem. You have to keep raising money that will help build the team further, that'll help solve the problem. And while sort of obviously staying focused on the users.
Mm-hmm. So I think, well, one thing that you mentioned that it really just piqued my interest is like the funding aspect of it. Like, how would a student, right? A student who maybe just coming out of college and they have this idea and they want to, they have like the core values that you're talking about. So they see a problem, they've come up with like a solution to it. Now they just need funding. Like, what are they supposed to do in like the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, another great question. So there is the stereotypical journey that Silicon Valley has outlined, which is you start with trying to raise money with friends and family first, right? You'll probably get to like 50 to 100,000 leveraging friends and family. That can also be called your angel round. After your angel round, you want to try to see if you can get pre-seed, where you're now getting involved with more institutional investors. And then you'll probably, with your pre-seed, you can raise anywhere between 100 grand to $500,000. Once you've had the success in these two fields, then you become a little bit more mature, hopefully, to now start raising seed rounds. And seed rounds will typically go between $500,000 to like 4 million, 5 million. After you've done your seed round, then you've got your Series A, B, C, and then your IPO. So that's typically the journey. I would say, as far as being able to raise funds is concerned, each one of those steps will teach you a lot. So I think as much as possible, first create value. If possible, show rather than tell, right? If you can show value rather than talking about that value, you're always going to have greater chance of success. But if you don't have anything to show yet, because it requires a certain amount of capital to develop a platform that then creates value, then you want to have a really good story that you're constantly practicing and telling other people, so that then you fine tune it, get lots of really valuable feedback, and then progress along that journey.
Mm-hmm. Earlier you were kind of mentioning about how, like, okay, when you come up with these ideas or you have an idea, and kind of not to really keep it, so close to you, but you have to kind of like branch out and, figure out what do users want? Like, how has that process been for you? Like, how have you been able to find out in terms of creating touch, like what the users want? Like, if there have been any experiences where what you thought they wanted was kind of different from what they actually wanted, if you could kind of like delve into that.
All the time. I think everything we create are just like, all the solutions that we're creating are just hypothesis on what we think is a solution, till we try it out, and then we realize that that is not necessarily so. It's not the solution, right? So I think that's why anchoring ourselves in the problem is very important. And what we've really understood is like, if you can understand the problem very, very deeply, then the solution lies in just understanding the problem very deeply. And so there's a lot of times when we will put together a hypothesis and we will present a hypothesis to our users, where they'll be like, no, this really doesn't cut it. Like, makes absolutely no sense to me. So then we have to sort of obviously like continue to get that input, get that feedback from the user, I'll give you an example. When we started off early on this journey, we thought that, what the users really wanted was to improve their confidence in investing, which can be done by providing them with educational content, which is curated for them as a user. And we initiated with podcasts. And when we started presenting those podcasts, our users, quickly told us that this is not contextualized enough. It is not curated enough, and it's because the problem is of like the solution is artificial intelligence, leveraging artificial intelligence so that you can really curate the feed to the user. But then you have the cold start problem, which is you don't necessarily fully understand the user yet. The user has to really use the solution in order for it to become more and more relevant to you. And so then we had to sort of like then take a step back and say, this is not the right path for us, because the users are saying it's not solving their problem of getting to financial freedom. It's not even taking the first few steps. So that's when we sort of decided, okay, let's put this on ice, and we now have to, really think about this problem further, and again, begin with asking the right questions rather than trying to put a solution in front of the customer or the user. Asking the right questions that will shed light on what the actual problem is. To give you an example, once we decided to pivot from that direction, the new direction was, all right, so let's understand what are the user's largest assets. And we uncovered that their largest asset was something called as a 401k. So now we want to understand what are the problems that the user is facing in that 401k space. And the largest problem, when we just simply ask them, do you have an understanding of how your 401k funds are performing in comparison to everything else that is available to you? A quarter of people said no, and it's like a black hole. They have absolutely no idea. And this is their biggest number one asset in many cases. So we're like, all right, that's another big problem, is they don't even know how this specific fund is performing in their 401k. So how can we create more visibility into that space so that then they can improve their performance? When we took that hypothesis and we applied it to this new sort of like solution and service that we were creating, we tested it with a group of the first 10 paid pilot users from Oracle, Optum, as well as Google. We saw that 50% of the users made a change to their 401k pretty much the same day. And 6 months fast forward, now we are seeing an average increase in their performance by 2%. So not only did we say we were wrong, we did not fully understand what the problem was. We went and asked, we sort of outlined a narrow focus on an area, which was high impact, asked the right question, positioned another hypothesis, tested it out for 5 months, and now we're seeing positive results to say, okay, this hypothesis makes sense. It seems to be working. So that's sort of how we've gone about it.
I mean, yeah, I think that's really impressive. The fact that and this is why I really admire, like entrepreneurs, is like when you're making these things, it's, you have to really, again, I mean, it's obviously also for your own benefit, but it is for the benefit of the customer. Think about all these things, and to be able to say that, okay, yeah, I was wrong, and and I can, but like, let me see what I can do to make it better. And then you figure out their needs and work around that. I think that's obviously takes a certain level of like, awareness. And I think that's really impressive. And I think that students who are interested in, starting their own startups and just getting into that field could really learn from that. So my next question to you really is, though, you have two upcoming products, correct me if I'm wrong, Touch App and Touch Box. So if I am a user, right, if you could explain what each will offer and how that would benefit me.
Yeah, great, perfect. So the first one, let me elaborate that on that a little bit, but before that, the touch box is another one of our failed
Okay.
experiments.
Yeah.
So we're putting that aside. I know you and I talked about that a few months ago,
Hmm.
and so we're obviously, always looking to plant different seeds in the space, and we see which seeds really, take, and the touch app is definitely something that is our number one focus. I'll maybe elaborate a little bit more on that.
Hmm.
Um, but before I get into that, I'd like to share one quick data point. One of the things that we've noticed is that 85, actually, Wall Street Journal conducted this survey and found that 85% of the fully managed funds that are out there are underperforming the market. And so that's the majority over the last year. And if you look at a longer time frame, like 10 years, over the last 10 years, 75% of the managed funds that are out there have underperformed the market. So the market, obviously being the S&P 500, is probably the leading indicator for what the market is averaging at, right? Over the last, I would say, 5 to 6 decades, that is the one benchmark that has consistently stood out in everybody's sort of like analysis. And so we're focused on that, right? Like, so what we've identified is that there's this big problem that it's hard to find funds that are outperforming market. It is hard to outperform the market in the first place. So our goal is to get our users that are underperforming the market to being able to then be able to at least perform at the market rate. With that said, like one of the first questions that we'll usually ask our users is, are you aware how does your portfolio currently perform in comparison to the market? And 9 times out of 10, we'll usually get a response that they have absolutely no idea. Like, how is that overall portfolio really performing in comparison to the market? And when you don't have that understanding, that also means that you don't understand where the gaps are. So our goal is very straightforward. We're trying to create the LinkedIn of investing. I'll let that sink in for a second.
Yes.
LinkedIn of investing. What that really means is kind of like what LinkedIn did. LinkedIn was trying to solve the problem of connecting a workforce, right, and employing them. And they brought together the two main personas, which is the candidate and the recruiter, right? And leveraging the profile and making the social platform, they were able to connect recruiters to candidates. What we are trying to do is we're trying to create similarly a user profile that will connect our investors, individual investors, to advisors. And you've got professional advisors as well as amateur advisors. So in a nutshell, that is exactly what we are trying to achieve. I can talk more about it if you'd like, but
I mean, yes, please. Anything else you could share? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So I think end of the day, what we are trying to do in the immediate term and what we have created is super simple. It is basically nothing but a user profile. So if Brittany logs into Touch, you'll basically go in and connect your 401k, your IRA, and your, say, brokerage account. Once you've connected these, then what happens is now you're able to go out and reach out to people that are in your community that you lean in on, right? Are there people that typically that you have like trusted advisors that you like ask for advice when it comes to investing yourself?
Oh, you're asking me personally?
Mhm.
Not really.
Do you have any type of investments at all or no?
I do, but it's since I'm not really that good with it, I've been using, I'm sorry, I'm looking over at my phone to tell you the correct information. I've been using Acorns because
Got
I think that for beginners that's kind of the best way to go because like, we don't really know that much as yet. So that's what I'm starting off with right
yeah.
now. Mhm.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And the reason why I ask is because I'm trying to understand the level of complexity you're at, right? Like, so you're currently you're fairly straightforward. Your investing strategy is like sort of single file, single dimension. users in our that we're typically targeting are in their early 30s, and they have at least 3 or 4 different types of investments that they have, and it's hard to fully understand how their entire fund is performing, how their entire assets are performing, and then how the individual components are performing as well. So we're trying to solve that problem by giving them, and by connecting to their financial institutions, giving them the right transparency into how their entire fund is performing, like how Brittany's fund is performing, and then how the individual components are performing in comparison to the market. Because if you're underperforming the market, it is really simple. All you have to really do is invest in any S&P 500 index fund. That's it. And you'll get market returns. And market returns are fairly consistent over a period of like 10, 15 years. So I hope that sort of answers your question.
Yes, it does. I like hearing you speak, and I know for a fact that my mom would love to talk to you right now. I can just like see her, and she's like in front of the TV, just like watching like how the market's doing. Like I feel like she would have loved to have spoken with you.
Hi, Mom.
Yes, but yeah. Oh gosh, but anyways, yeah, so with touch, I obviously what is important about it is, again, financial knowledge, financial literacy. And I think that I from since you obviously know a lot, what do you think is like a piece of financial knowledge that you think that like everyone should just know, like everyone should know?
I would say usually the simplest solutions are the best solutions. And to that question, and that's a big problem. The simplest and the easiest solution is invest early and often. And number 2 is just invest in an S&P 500 index fund. That's it. Like you do those 2 things, you're going to make enough and more money through the magic of compounding interest over your career. So I would say that's like the simplest advice that I can give you, that I feel is mired in reality and has the highest chance of success.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna make a mental note of that. Yeah,
you're already doing it with Acorn. I think
yes, yeah, exactly. I just need to learn more, but yeah. But anyways, yeah, so lastly, I would love to ask you again, because I think the focus of this has obviously been touch, and how you went about creating that. Do you have any, if you haven't already shared them, any like final tips for students to create their own startup? Anything that you think that will benefit them in some way that you obviously haven't already mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that creating a startup is a very, very hard, very challenging experience. And I would say the number 1 trait that most investors will typically look for is perseverance and a good team, right? And so you kind of have to like work through really hard problems. And I would say that constantly surrounding yourself with hard things and doing hard things and proving to yourself that you're able and capable of tackling very difficult things and solving them and overcoming hard things will definitely help you a lot. I think it's the case with most successful people. It's facing hardships that allows them, and I think sometimes we kind of have to put ourselves in that position to learn from it. Throughout my short career, I've had the opportunity to obviously not just focus a lot on my career, but also doing things like running the New York City Marathon. I was like, really passionate about wanting to push myself to the limits. And I figured when I did the New York City Marathon, I said, hey, this was not that hard. I want to do something that is harder still. I pursued the Ironman, went and, completed the Ironman, even though I was like finished in 16 hours. It was probably the last 100 people that crossed the finish line. But that said, it's like, I'd never really run in my life. Prior to that, I was not a big, athlete. But I think taking on really, really hard challenges, constantly surrounding yourself with great people, I think those are two things that will help you get through and create something like a startup and be able to persevere.
Mhm. I agree a lot. I think that there are a lot of people that, who are successful. It's like it reflects in their personal lives as well. Like they're just really on top of things. Like you said, like the marathon, like running that, and other people, they will wake up, like they have certain goals, and outside of work, like they still have that mindset of perseverance. So I think that's really good advice to give to my peers. But anyways, yes, I'm honestly super happy that we had this discussion. I hope that there is that our discussion was kind of flowed properly. I know there were some technical difficulties, but I'm honestly truly grateful that you were able to, take time out of your day to share this information with us. So thank you.
Absolutely.